Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents 1001 Solution-Focused Questions, Handbook for Solution-Focused Interviewing, by Fredrike Bannink, narrated by Gould. Publisher's note: this audiobook refers to figures and tables included in the print and e-book editions of the book. Nothing is constant in the whole world. Everything is in a state of flux and comes into being as a transient appearance. Time itself flows on with constant motion, just like a river, for no more than a river can the fleeting hour stand still. As wave is driven on by wave, and, itself pursued, pursues the one before. So the moments of time at once flee and follow, and are ever new. What was before is left behind, that which was not comes to be, and every minute gives place to another. Ovid, The Metamorphoses. Forward. Solution-focused interviewing is based on the respectful assumption that clients have the inner resources to construct highly individualized and uniquely effective solutions to their problems. It is a great pleasure to welcome this valuable addition to the growing collection of writings worldwide about the use of the solution-focused approach. With this clear and well-written book, Fredrike Bannink makes the solution-building approach accessible to many listeners. It is a handbook that is meant for both students and advanced practitioners who are interested in sharpening their solution-focused skills. The format of the book has something of a workshop-like quality. Exercises are offered throughout the book to give the listener the opportunity to integrate the solution-building approach through action learning. A wide variety of solution-focused techniques are introduced that allow the practitioner to reach out to clients to mobilize their resources. The 1001 solution-focused questions presented in this book will give the listener a very good idea of the importance of the precise use of language as a tool in solution-focused interviewing. Questions are included with which to negotiate the goal in the beginning of the therapy, questions for measuring progress, and questions for finding out what successful steps clients have taken to achieve their goals. Listeners of 1001 Solution-Focused Questions, Handbook for Solution-Focused Interviewing, are invited to open themselves to a new light on interviewing clients. Insoo Kim Berg, 1934 to 2007. Preface. You are hungry and decide to go eat at a restaurant. After you have waited a while, you are invited to take a seat. The maitre d' introduces himself and starts asking you questions about your hunger. How severe is your hunger? How did you come by it? How long have you had it? Have you been hungry before? What role has your hunger played in your family or in your relationship with other relatives? What disadvantages and, perhaps, advantages does it have for you? When you ask to eat after this, hungrier still, the maitre d' first wants you to fill out a few questionnaires about hunger and probably about other matters that the maitre d' feels are important as well. After all this, you are served a meal that you did not choose yourself, but rather one that the maitre d' claims is good for you and has helped hungry people in the past. What do you suppose the chances are that you will leave the restaurant satisfied? As an alternative to the problem-focused vein, it has been possible since the 1980s to conduct solution-focused conversations in mental health care, education, coaching, and mediation. Such conversations are not concerned with the exploration and analysis of a problem, the assertion of a diagnosis, and the prescription of a treatment by an expert to bring about symptom reduction. Diagnosis plus treatment prescription equals symptom reduction. Solution-focused interviewing is concerned with mapping a situation in the future that the client desires and with finding ways to help the client reach that goal. Goal formulation plus solutions designed by the client equals desired outcome. In solution-focused interviewing, one speaks of clients instead of patients, as use of the term patient needlessly pathologizes. DeShazer viewed solution-focused interviewing as a tap on the shoulder. The solution-focused professional does not need to push or pull. Rather, he or she is always one step behind the client and looking in the same direction. A tap on the shoulder directs the client's attention and helps him or her look at something from a different angle. This stance is also called the stance of leading from one step behind. Solution-focused questions are that tap on the shoulder. I would like to pass along the solution-focused questions that I have gathered over the years, with the help of my students, to others who currently practice or want to practice solution-focused interviewing. The idea for this book arose when I was writing the book Opplösungsgerichte Mediation. I initially wanted to append the questions to the book as an addendum. However, because solution-focused questions may be of interest to a broader readership than just professionals who work with people with conflicts, I decided to collect the questions in the book now before you. In addition to a description of the way in which solution-focused interviewing can be applied, you will find 1001 solution-focused questions in this book. While I do not pretend to have mapped all solution-focused questions, you will surely be able to think of others, and you would probably classify some questions under a different heading than I have done. Many students tell me that practicing with these questions again and again helps them hold on to and continue the solution-focused thread in sessions with clients. This book is not intended for professionals who are satisfied with the current concepts and models of interviewing. This book is meant for professionals who reflect seriously enough on their profession and its possibilities to be dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. And it is meant for professionals who are interested in examining where the concept and model of solution-focused interviewing may lead. This book aims to inspire and invite professionals in the field of therapy, education, coaching and mediation to expand their existing skills and to optimally deploy their creative powers to help their clients. Each chapter contains a section about the theory and a section about the practice of solution-focused interviewing. Throughout the book are 24 exercises which are an invitation to engage in self-reflection and experimentation with the solution-focused model. You may, of course, think up other exercises as well. Chapter 1 provides an overview of the history, principles, theory, research and practice of solution-focused interviewing. Chapter 2 discusses the cooperative relationship of the therapist with the client and raises the important topic of motivation for behaviour change. Chapter 3 elaborates on the first session in solution-focused interviewing. Chapter 4 describes the subsequent session and the solution-focused professional's options of addressing client responses to the question, "What is better?" Chapter 5 offers suggestions for homework that the professional may assign to the client. Chapter 6 discusses possibilities for concluding the sessions. In Chapter 7, other solution-focused skills are addressed, including externalizing the problem, projecting into the future, and using the interactional matrix. Chapter 8 examines points of consideration for a productive collaboration with other, usually problem-focused, professionals, such as colleagues and referrers, groups and organisations. Chapter 9 explains how one can prevent or counteract impasse and failure, Chapter 10 incorporates the 1001 questions, categorized as questions for general use and questions for use in specific situations or with specific clients. Chapter 11 considers how solution-focused professionals can reflect upon the session and their role in it. They may ask themselves a number of solution-focused questions, too. Chapter 12 describes solution-focused interviewing from start to finish. Finally, Chapter 13 expounds on the view that solution-focused brief therapy can be considered a form of cognitive behavioural therapy. I hope that you enjoy this book, and I invite you to share your comments and this book and suggestions for the next 999 questions. You may contact me via email at solutions@fredrikebannink.com or through my website at www.fredrikebannink.com. Chapter 1. Solution-Focused Interviewing. The pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Winston Churchill. Finding solutions or solving problems. According to the cause-effect model, also called the medical model or the problem-focused model, one must find out exactly what is the matter in order to assert a correct diagnosis before a remedy can be provided. In Western thinking, the cause-effect model is the preeminent model that allows us to make the world understandable. The model is useful if one is dealing with relatively straightforward problems that can be reduced to simple and unambiguous causes, as is the case with medical and mechanical problems. The medical model is based on the equation diagnosis plus prescribed treatment equals symptom reduction. As far as interviewing is concerned, however, this model has a major disadvantage. It is heavily problem-focused. When the problem and its possible causes are studied in depth, a vicious circle of ever-growing problems may develop. The atmosphere becomes laden with problems, which poses the risk that the solution recedes ever further from view, and also that the hope of improvement dwindles. A colleague of mine sometimes refers to problem-focused therapy as problem-seeking therapy. Exploring or analysing the factors that cause or perpetuate a problem does not automatically result in an improvement or alleviation of the problem. Positing a diagnosis is usually considered unimportant in solution-focused interviewing. One adopts, rather, a model of stepped diagnosis, analogous to the model of stepped care. Hence, solution-focused brief therapy is a diagnosis-transcending treatment method. There is a growing dissatisfaction among clients and professionals with the use of problem-focused models of interviewing. Studying problems in depth often leads to the premature discontinuation of sessions because nothing changes and the client loses hope for improvement. The solution-focused model changes all that. Problems are viewed as challenges. Clients and professionals regain hope as clients are aided in designing the future they wish to achieve and the means of achieving their goals. You can find out more about the importance of hope and hope theory and how offering hope may lead to success in Chapters 2 and 3. Brief history. Solution-focused interviewing was developed in the 1980s by DeShazer, Berg, and their colleagues at the Brief Family Therapy Center in Milwaukee. They built on the findings of Bateson and Václavic, Weekland, and Fish, who believed that the attempted solution often perpetuated the problem and did not solve it, and that insight into the origin of the problem was not always necessary. DeShazer developed a number of principles concerning solution-focused interviewing, to which I have added a few remarks. The class of problems is distinct from the class of solutions. To reach a solution, it is not necessary to analyse problems, but it is necessary to analyse client solutions. For example, what have you already attempted in order to solve the problem, and which of those things have helped? The client is the expert. In the solution-focused model, one talks about the client and sometimes about the customer, not about the patient, as one does in the medical model. It is the client who determines his or her goal as well as the path to reach it. DeShazer has submitted that problems are like subway tickets. They help the client get through the turnstile, but they do not determine what train the client will take or where he or she will get off. In other words, where someone wants to go is not determined by the point of departure. If it works, don't fix it. The professional is not judgmental of what the client experiences as positive. If something works better, do more of it, even if it is something unexpected. Look for differences that make a difference. Usually, differences are not automatically effective. They need to be recognised by the client and significant to him or her in order to make a difference. The solution-focused model is aimed at describing exceptions to the rule of the problem, which the client often overlooks. Problems persist if only because the client thinks or says that the problems always occur. Times when the problem is absent or less of a problem lie at the surface, but they are dismissed by the client as insignificant or are not even noticed and hence remain hidden. They are simply not yet viewed by the client as differences that make a difference. The solution-focused professional keeps an eye out for the exceptions, however. The interventions are aimed at helping the client shift attention to precisely those times when things are different, through which solutions may reveal themselves. In this way, the client is encouraged to do more of what works, better. Moreover, the following applies. If you are not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. If something does not work, do something else. More of the same leads to nothing. According to a Japanese legend, a coastal village was threatened by a tsunami. A farmer at work in the rice paddies above the village saw the tidal wave approach from afar. Because there was no time to run back to the village and he was too far away to be heard by others, he stopped screaming and immediately set the fields on fire. The villagers came running at once to save their crops. That is how they were saved from drowning. The staff at the Brief Family Therapy Centre discovered that 3 specific types of therapist behaviour made clients 4 times as likely to talk about solutions, change, and resources. Asking eliciting questions. What would you like to see instead of the problem? Or, what is better? To be asked at the start of subsequent sessions. Asking questions about details. How exactly did you do that? What exactly did you do differently that made it go better? Giving verbal rewards by paying compliments and asking competence questions. How did you manage that? How did you come up with that fine idea? In 1985, DeShazer published his book, Keys to Solution in Brief Therapy. That same year, a book by De Bono was released titled Conflicts, A Better Way to Resolve Them, which showed marked similarities with DeShazer's book. I asked them whether they had ever met. They had not. In his book, De Bono identified designing a desired outcome as the best way to resolve conflicts. He also described the use of dream solutions, what-if questions, hypothetical questions, and the importance of making a small difference. For a comprehensive description of his ideas about conflict resolution and designing a desired outcome, I refer you to De Bono and Bannink. Erickson also contributed to the development of solution-focused intervention. He gave students the task of reading the last page of a book and speculating about what had preceded it. Solution-focused interviewing similarly departs from the ultimate goal. Erickson, a psychiatrist, emphasised the competence of the client and argued that the point was not to adapt the treatment to the diagnostic classification, but to find out what possibilities for taking a different course of action the client, him or herself, reveals. Erickson also used the hypnotic technique of pseudo-orientation in time. During hypnosis, he had his clients imagine running into him in 6 months and telling him that their problem had been solved and how they had achieved that. He ended the hypnosis by offering a few suggestions for the client to forget what had happened during the hypnosis. And even though they did not always apply the same solutions that they had put forward under hypnosis, it turned out that many of these patients reported doing better 6 months later. Covey wrote in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, "Begin with the end in mind. To begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now and so that the steps you take are always in the right direction." Among other things, Chapter 7 describes his technique of projection into the future, whereby one attends one's own funeral. Viktor Frankl is often cited in solution-focused literature as providing an example of the way in which future-oriented thinking can make a difference. In his book, he described his stay in a German concentration camp. The prisoner who had lost faith in the future, his future, was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He described his experience limping from the camp to the work site, in the cold and without food. He found himself thinking of something else. Suddenly, he saw himself standing at the podium of a large lecture hall, where he was giving a lecture about the psychology of the concentration camp. By this method, I succeeded somehow in rising above the situation, above the sufferings of the moment, and I observed them as if they were already of the past. At that moment, his focus on this image of the future saved his life. Seligman is the founder of positive psychology. In the 1970s, he became known for his books about learned helplessness, the firm conviction that one cannot solve one's own problems. Now he researches learned optimism. Positive psychology begins with the strengths of the client and the assumption that happiness is not the consequence of just the right genes or coincidence, but that it can be found through the identification and use of the strengths that the client already possesses, such as kindness, originality, humour, optimism, and generosity. Positive psychology, in which optimism, hope, and self-efficacy take centre stage, and solution-focused brief therapy have much in common. The following chapters revisit the import of offering hope, a time when the emancipation of the client is growing and he or she is no longer viewed as someone who fails and who doesn't know, but rather as an expert who sometimes does not yet know, calls for a modest attitude on the part of the professional. The latter coaches the client in finding his or her own way in reaching the future that he or she hopes for, and in relying on his or her own abilities as much as possible in the process. Solution-focused interviewing is consistent with this societal development. 10 Principles of Solution-Focused Interviewing. Seligman formulated 10 assumptions for solution-focused interviewing. The assumptions are pragmatic and provide the professional with a new lens through which to view the client. I have added a few notes to the assumptions. Resistance is not a useful concept. The concept of resistance implies that the client does not want to change and that the professional is at a remove from the client. It is better to approach the client from a position of cooperation than from a position of resistance, power and control. Chapter 2 revisits this issue. Cooperation is inevitable. The solution-focused professional must adapt to the client's manner of cooperating. Together they dance a solution-focused tango, as it were, whereby one always complements the other. The client leads, the professional follows. If the client and the professional lose one another on the dance floor, it is incumbent on the professional to ask the client what he or she needs to do differently in order to retrieve the connection. In a problem-focused tango, the reverse applies. The professional leads, the client follows, and it is up to the client to find the professional if they lose one another on the dance floor. If this does not occur, terms like resistance are invoked. The solution-focused professional draws upon the client's strengths and resources and his or her words and opinions, and elicits compliments by asking competence questions. Humour and normalisation are useful in this respect. Compliments constitute a form of positive reinforcement of desired behaviour. They can take various forms. The professional provides a positive new label, also called positive character interpretation. For example, worry can be seen as a sign of commitment. You must be a committed person to, would you like to tell me more? The professional pays the client direct compliments on what he or she does or says. The best solution-focused compliments are indirect compliments that the client can pay him or herself by answering competence questions. How did you do that? How did you accomplish that? How did you come up with that fine idea? How did you know that that would help? Asking about exceptions, about the times when the client has not had the problem, or when it has been less of a problem, can be considered complimentary as well. After all, at those moments, the client did something that worked, and by paying heed to this, the professional can direct the client's attention to his or her solutions rather than limitations. Change is inevitable. Change is a continuous process. Stability is an illusion. The question is not whether, but when change will occur. As Ovid puts it in his Metamorphoses, nothing is constant in the whole world. Everything is in a state of flux and comes into being as a transient appearance. The client can be encouraged to create positive, self-fulfilling prophecies. There appears to be a direct correlation between talking about change and the outcome of the therapy. Talking about successes in the past, present, and future is helpful. Gathering information about present and past failures, on the other hand, leads to negative outcomes. Observing for oneself that one is doing well improves one's performance. Only a small change is needed. As soon as clients are encouraged to notice and value small changes, exceptions, they begin to expect further changes and believe in the snowball effect of small changes. Unbeknownst to them, clients usually already carry the rudiments of solutions within themselves. These are the exceptions to the problem, hidden successes. Inquiring about exceptions offers indications of what positive steps one could take again or could take more often. Asking about hypothetical solutions, about how things should be different, also yields indications about the directions in which solutions can be sought. Because the client is the expert and comes up with solutions him or herself, they are a natural fit for the client and his or her situation. They are found more quickly.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?